hidden anxiety behind investing isn't fear of losing money. That's what people say, but it's not the real source. The real anxiety lives deeper. It lives in uncertainty, responsibility, and identity. And almost everyone who invests feels it, even the ones who look confident. Let's start by clearing a misconception. Most people assume anxiety means they're doing something wrong, that if investing feels uncomfortable, it's because they lack knowledge, discipline, or experience. That's not true. Investing should feel uncomfortable, because investing forces the brain to do something it hates. Wait without control. Now let's talk about what investing actually asks of you emotionally. It asks you to give up certainty, to accept delayed feedback, to tolerate fluctuations without immediate correction, to sit with outcomes you can't influence daily. That's not a technical challenge. That's an emotional one. And the brain doesn't like emotional ambiguity. The brain prefers action, correction, intervention. Doing nothing feels irresponsible, even when it's the correct move. This is the first source of hidden anxiety. Inaction feels unsafe. Now let's talk about control. In most areas of life, effort produces results. Work harder, get better outcomes, practice more, improve performance, fix mistakes, see correction. Investing breaks that loop. You can do everything right and still see negative outcomes in the short term. That violates the brain's expectation of fairness. So anxiety emerges, not because of loss, but because of helplessness. Now let's talk about responsibility. When you invest, you become responsible for your future self. That's heavy. Every decision feels like it carries decades of consequences. What if this is the wrong choice? What if I mess this up? What if I regret this later? This is anticipatory anxiety, fear of future regret. And the more you care about your future, the stronger this anxiety becomes. Ironically, caring deeply increases discomfort. Now let's talk about visibility. Investing makes outcomes visible. Balances fluctuate, markets move, numbers change. This constant visibility invites emotional interpretation. A red number feels like failure. A green number feels like validation, but neither is accurate. They're just noise. Yet the brain reacts anyway. This creates emotional whiplash. Now let's talk about comparison. Investing happens in a social environment. People talk about wins. Screenshots circulate. Success stories are amplified. Failures are hidden. This distorts perception. People assume others are calm, confident, and successful. They're not. They're anxious too. But comparison turns private uncertainty into shame. If everyone else knows what they're doing, why don't I? Now let's talk about identity threat. Investing challenges self-image. People want to see themselves as smart, responsible, and capable. Market losses threaten that identity. It feels personal. I should have known. I made a mistake. I'm not good at this. Even when the outcome had nothing to do with skill. This identity threat amplifies anxiety. Now let's talk about time distortion. Investing compresses long-term outcomes into short-term visuals. You're investing for decades, but watching results daily. This mismatch is psychologically toxic. Daily monitoring amplifies anxiety. It magnifies noise. It creates urgency where none is required. The brain wasn't built to track long-term processes at short-term intervals. Now let's talk about the myth of confidence. People assume experienced investors don't feel anxiety. They do. The difference is not absence of anxiety, it's relationship to it. Experienced investors expect discomfort. They don't interpret it as a signal to act. Inexperienced investors interpret anxiety as danger. That interpretation drives poor decisions. Now let's talk about fear of irreversibility. Many investment decisions feel permanent. Once money is invested, it feels locked, committed, exposed. This triggers loss aversion. The pain of potential loss feels stronger than the pleasure of potential gain. So hesitation appears. Delay feels safer than action. But delay has a cost. Anxiety persists. Now let's talk about the illusion of perfect timing. Anxiety pushes people to wait for clarity, a better moment, a clearer signal, a safer entry. That moment rarely arrives. Markets remain uncertain, so anxiety stretches indefinitely. People stay stuck between fear of loss and fear of missing out. That tension is exhausting. Now let's talk about emotional overload. Investing advice is everywhere. Strategies, opinions, predictions, warnings. Information overload increases anxiety. Instead of clarity, people feel confusion. Confusion triggers paralysis. Now let's talk about the core misunderstanding. Investing anxiety does not mean investing is wrong. It means investing touches deep psychological wiring. Fear of uncertainty, fear of responsibility, fear of regret, fear of identity damage. These fears don't disappear with more information. They soften with structure. Now let's talk about what actually reduces investing anxiety. Not prediction, not certainty, not constant monitoring. Structure, systems that remove decision points, automation that removes timing, rules that remove emotion, simplicity that reduces cognitive load. When investing becomes mechanical, anxiety drops. Now let's talk about time again. Time is the antidote to anxiety, but only if behavior is consistent. Consistent systems build trust. Trust reduces emotional reactivity. Reduced reactivity improves outcomes. Now let's talk about acceptance. Investing requires accepting discomfort as normal, not something to fix, not something to escape, something to coexist with. This acceptance changes everything. Anxiety loses urgency. Fear loses authority. Now, let's talk about the final truth. The hidden anxiety behind investing is not a weakness. It's a sign you're doing something meaningful. You're engaging with uncertainty. You're planning beyond the present. You're taking responsibility for a future you can't fully control. That's inherently uncomfortable. And that discomfort never fully disappears, but it becomes quieter, less convincing, less controlling. Now let's close with perspective. The goal is not to feel calm all the time. The goal is to invest without letting anxiety dictate behavior. Calm comes later. Confidence comes later. Peace comes later. Consistency comes first. And consistency is built by designing systems that work with human psychology, not against it. Once you stop expecting investing to feel emotionally safe, it becomes emotionally manageable. And that's when progress finally compounds, not just financially, but psychologically. There's another source of investing anxiety that rarely gets named. It's the anxiety of being observed, even when no one is actually watching. Investing makes people feel exposed. Your choices feel like a reflection of your intelligence. Your outcomes feel like a judgment of your competence. Your timing feels like a public statement about your skill. So every fluctuation feels personal. This is why people hesitate to talk about losses, why they downplay mistakes, why they exaggerate wins. The anxiety isn't just about money. It's about self-image. Now let's talk about narrative anxiety. Humans need stories to feel coherent. I make good decisions. I'm responsible. I'm building towards something. Investing disrupts narrative. Markets don't follow clean story arcs. Progress is uneven. Success and failure are intermixed. This makes it hard to tell a satisfying story about yourself. And when the story feels unstable, anxiety fills the gap. Now let's talk about moral pressure. Many people believe good outcomes should follow good behavior. Do your research. Be patient. Follow the rules. When markets don't reward that immediately, it feels unfair. Unfairness triggers anger and anxiety because it threatens the belief that the world is predictable. Investing exposes randomness. Randomness feels unsafe. Now let's talk about the urge to intervene. Anxiety creates action bias, the feeling that doing anything is better than waiting. This is why people tinker, rebalance constantly, chase news, switch strategies. Action creates temporary relief. It feels like control. But relief is not the same as progress, and the relief fades quickly, leaving anxiety behind. Now, let's talk about information addiction. Many anxious investors consume more content to feel safer. More charts, more opinions, more predictions. But information without clarity increases noise. Noise increases anxiety. This creates a loop. Anxiety, then information, no, overload, more anxiety. Now let's talk about bodily anxiety. Investing anxiety is not just mental. It lives in the body. Tightness, restlessness, compulsive checking, sleep disruption. This is the nervous system reacting to uncertainty. The mistake is trying to think your way out of a nervous system response. You can't. You have to design around it. Now let's talk about rhythm. The nervous system needs rhythm and predictability. Markets don't provide that, so systems must. Scheduled investing, fixed rules, limited check-ins, clear time horizons. These rhythms calm the body. Now let's talk about acceptance again. Acceptance doesn't mean liking volatility. It means not treating it as an emergency. The shift from emergency to background noise is critical. Emergencies demand action. Background noise can be ignored. Now let's talk about confidence. Confidence in investing doesn't come from certainty. It comes from repeated exposure without catastrophe. Time in the market builds emotional tolerance, not excitement, tolerance. And tolerance is what reduces anxiety. Now let's talk about the quiet truth. Most investing anxiety disappears after consistency is established, not before. People wait to feel calm before acting. But calm comes from acting consistently over time. This reversal trips people up. Now let's talk about the final integration. Investing anxiety is not a sign to stop, it's a sign to simplify. Fewer decisions, fewer variables, fewer touch points, more automation, more distance, more trust in time. Now let's close with the deepest truth. Investing is one of the few activities where the correct behavior often feels wrong. Doing nothing feels irresponsible. Waiting feels dangerous. Ignoring noise feels naive. But the discomfort is the cost of long-term gain. And once you accept that cost as normal, anxiety loses its power. It stops dictating behavior, stops driving reaction, stops consuming attention. It becomes a background sensation, not a commander. And that's when investing finally becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a test of intelligence, not a contest of nerves, not a daily emotional event, but a quiet partnership with time, working slowly, imperfectly, relentlessly, in your favor.